What's the most bizarre historical fact you know? It was once common to sell you Peter tanners. They used it to soften hides to make clothing. In 1767, when British Captain Samuel Wallis journeyed to Tahiti to trade, his crew found that the natives would exchange iron for sex. As a result, the crew began prying iron nails and fittings from anything they could find, to the point Scott had to end the trip early because the crew had begun to remove the nails from the deck boards and beams, literally taking the ship apart in harbor. The first US conscript of WWI was the father of the first US conscript of World War II. Conscripts were chosen at random for both wars. George Washington spent roughly 15% of his money on liquor. Ancient Minoans had plumbing, heated floors and running water 3,000 years before the Romans figured it out. A German soldier deserted his company right before World War II ended. He found an officer uniform, and instead of using it to escape, he used it to order a massacre of other German deserters at a detention camp. Albert Einstein was offered the presidency of Israel on November 17, 1952, following the death of Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann. He declined, saying he lacked the natural aptitude and the experience to deal properly with people to do the job. During the Apollo 8 flight, astronaut commander Frank Borman came down with a stomach bug and ended up vomiting and shitting himself at the same time. There was barf and diarrhea floating around the space capsule, and the other astronauts had to put on gas masks to block the stench while they cleaned it up. When FDR died in office, the Manhattan Project atomic bomb was so secret that his vice president didn't even know about it, and upon taking oath Truman had to be briefed on the existence of the bomb. A cat supposedly survived the sinking of the Bismarck and went on to survive 2 more sinkings. Very oversimplified. For more info look up Unsinkable Sam. One of my favorite ones is the fact that Kim Jong-il was a big movie buff, and at some point he was just fed up with shitty North Korean films, so he just ordered this director from South Korea to be kidnapped so they could have cooler films. That a rebellion attempt in Venice was thwarted by the deadly aim of an annoyed grandma with a mortar. That a rebellion attempt in Venice was thwarted by the deadly aim of an annoyed grandma with a mortar at the Anglo-Zanzibar. The war is the shortest military conflict in history, lasting 38 to 45 minutes. I learned this recently from a TV show that had nothing to do with history. Ancient Greek tragedian Aeschylus, California, 450 BCE, received a prophecy that he would die by something falling on his head. He spent the rest of his life outside in open fields, where a passing bird dropped a turtle on his head and killed him. LBJ owned a car that could be driven into water, but he wouldn't tell people such as ambassadors, and would pretend the brakes had failed and drive into the water as a prank. The man who survived both of the atomic bomb attacks on Japan, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, was on a business trip in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the first bomb was dropped. Being no more than 2 miles away from ground zero, he suffered multiple injuries, but survived. He eventually managed to leave the city by train to return to his home in Nagasaki. On August 9th, Yamaguchi showed up to work and was telling his bosses about his ordeal in Hiroshima when the second bomb was dropped. Although he was a similar distance away from the second blast as he was from the first, Yamaguchi miraculously survived again. A survivor of the Titanic managed to survive 5 hours in the freezing water, only to meet his demise later in life by drowning in a shallow pond. Bodies of victims who had died from plague were used as biological weapons during the Middle Ages. During the siege of Kaffa, bodies of plague victims were catapulted over the city walls to infect the inhabitants by the invading Mongol army. The most expensive opera costume of all time was worn by Adele in a party at Covent Garden in 1895. It was worth £15 million. The largest bell ever cast was cast in bronze, Myanmar 1484, and sank in a river in 1608. It is several times larger than the next largest, and may be recoverable. A man was once executed in colonial America for bestiality with a pig. The evidence? The piglets looked him, so he must be the father. On December 7th, 1941, the old destroyer Russ Ward, under the command of William Outerbridge, fired America's first shot of WW-2 when it sank a Japanese midget submarine attempting to sneak into Pearl Harbor. Exactly 3 years later, on December 7th, 1944, the wood was fatally damaged by a kamikaze and had to be abandoned. A nearby destroyer, the US O'Brien, moved in to rescue survivors and to scuttle the ward. The man commanding the O'Brien? William Outerbridge. Giles D. Race, Joan of Arc's right-hand man and hero of the 100 Years' War, was executed and had his reputation ruined when it came out that he had been raping and murdering hundreds of children. But to this day almost no one knows that he was more than likely innocent and was even retrieved and cleared of wrongdoing in France in 1992. The youngest person to ever give birth was a 5-year-old girl. Her name is Lina Marcela Medina de Jurado, and she is still alive today. Towards the end of WWII, when Germany was falling apart, they had POWs farming turnips which were used to create a biofuel to run trucks on. Napoleon had a marshal named Bernadette. Napoleon had a relationship with Bernadette's wife before they married. Napoleon likes to remind him that he had anal sex with his wife before they married just to piss him off. Bernadette would later quit and become the King of Sweden and fight against Napoleon. Learned this from my Napoleon history professor in college. There are stone penises carved into the roads of Pompeii directing people to brothels. 2,000 years later those dicks still look marvelous. Fidel Castro loves milk and other dairy products so much he got into an argument with a French ambassador over who had better cheese. In the 90s, following the fall of the Soviet Union, they were low on cash. Therefore Pepsi accepted 17 submarines, a frigate, cruiser and destroyer as payment for their products, giving PepsiCo one of the largest navies in the world at the time. When X-rays were first discovered in the 1800s, people found that if you held an X-ray tube up to your eye, you'd see something akin to fireworks. This is a result of the X-rays hitting the molecules in your eye, then exciting the electrons to a higher energy level. When the electrons fell back to their base state, energy would be released in the form of heat and visible light. The light being emitted was what people saw. They had no idea that radiation was harmful. Thus, X-ray tubes became commonplace at parties of rich people. Empress Josephine used to perform a sexual act known as a zigzag on Napoleon, and historians aren't quite sure exactly what it was that she did to him. Sex workers used to hide evidence of STDs by wearing a merkin, which is basically a wig for the lady parts. It also hid the fact that they shaved to get rid of pubic lice. Sometimes they were just used for decoration though, so your mom actually isn't lying when she says that. In the year 892, Sigurd the Mighty of Orkney was feeling pretty proud of himself after killing his foe, Malbrigd. So proud, in fact, that he cut off Brigd's head and strapped it to his horse's saddle. Unfortunately for Sigurd, he sat in such a way that caused Brigd's teeth to rub against his legs and create an open wound. The wound became infected, and Sigurd eventually died as a result. Coffee was popularized in the Ottoman Empire, and for a long time was banned in Europe as a satanic drink. That is, until Pope Clement VIII drank a cup, liked it, and reportedly said this Satan's drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. Isaac Newton led to investigations into Britain's most successful forger in his capacity as head of the Royal Mint. That forger's first job in London was making big clocks with dildos on them. Mary Queen of Scots had a croquet mallet fashioned from a petrified narwhal horn. She never lost a game using it. Ketchup was sold in the 1830s as medicine. It was sold as a cure for indigestion. That a crocodile was taken from a zoo in Nazi Germany by the Soviets as a prize. In 1991, when Yeltsin took a tank division to fire at the Russian White House, the crocodile started to whimper because he had some sort of animal PTSD. He died recently. That crocodile managed to outlive two brutal regimes. That a Roman emperor, Caligula, declared war on the sea, or more on their god Neptune, is kinda wired, especially without the historical context. Just imagine a Roman legion standing at the coast, stabbing water with their lances, and collecting seashells as war trophies. Adderall, a drug commonly given to children for ads, was used primarily by the Nazis to make more powerful fighters. Hitler had sexual feelings for his niece, who later killed herself as he became too possessive. Krakatoa, when it erupted, caused the loudest recorded noise known to man. Everyone within a certain radius died or got permanent ear damage. Krakatoa also didn't just erupt, it fucking imploded, taking the island it rested on out with it. If you liked this video, smash the like button and subscribe for daily dose of Reddit. Have fun and get reddited.